Absolutely.
All right. Welcome back to the Religion of Human Nature podcast. I have someone who has become one of my favorite people to work with. He and I have been getting together about every 2 weeks now. Bob Saget. How are you, Bob?
I'm good. I need to see you more. Maybe we need to move in together.
It would be a full house. There you go.
See there, yeah, never heard that. Or fuller. I always joke that one day it'll be fullest house. It'll be me in an urn by the window. That's the pat joke now.
I love it. So today we're gonna talk about something that Bob is not only an expert on in the television world, which we'll talk about, but also in his real life, which came up in one of our discussions, which is one of the things he feels most proud of is being a parent. So you said this to me, and it really caught my attention. What is it about being a parent that you think you've done right and that means so much to you?
Well, there's no way. Thank you, by the way. And you called me an expert, and I am by far not an expert in parenting, but we all try our best, and I think that's the key, is to be wanting to communicate with your kids from the moment they are born. Some say before they're born, talk to the belly, But the main thing that I always used to tell people is kind of a joke, but also the truth. Just love them and drive them until you can't drive them anymore, until they get their driver's license. And then at 13, when they're on the bar and bat mitzvah circuit, or at 13 going to parties not of the Jewish faith, which does exist, get them a phone. You got to have a phone because you can't put LoJack on them. You just want them safe. You want them safe, and you try to get the truth to them and then hear their truth, hear what they're feeling. And it's hard to do it, especially if you're a busy person or you're stressed out over the world or over work, which a lot of us are, over what's happened in people's lives. This past year and a half has been disastrous for kids. And my daughters couldn't make me more proud. And I think I mentioned to you, the only reason I think that I could be a good parent is because how remarkable my daughters are and how strong they are, and, empowered, strong women that have worked on themselves and continue to work on themselves. And I couldn't be more proud. And I think that's what you do, is you instill as much confidence as you can, but they have to find that on their own. And so just kind of, help them try to thrive and somehow help them flourish, to find out who they are, what they want. It's so hard. It's so hard because the luck of the draw, DNA, all the factors that come into play. So many people have such a hard lot in life. So I guess compassion and try to really understand where they're coming from. And then also a certain amount of guidance, which could be discipline. It could be conversation. Discipline meaning you can't do this if you do this. I'm not big on the smacking them around. Some people, I was doing a show the other night and I said, anybody ever spank one of their kids? And one gentleman, his name was Christian, and he said he does it Christmas morning. He spanks them after he gives them the presents and says that you won't get any more if you do anything wrong all year. So I went, well, that's an interesting way of parenting.
Each their own, I guess. Yeah, parenting has certainly changed. It's actually something that, as a rabbi, I didn't realize how much I'd be involved with. I knew birth and death and, somewhere in between, but how many people really ask about parenting, and also going through myself being, you certainly also have this where you're in front of people. And so your image is different than what happens in the home. It has to be.
Mine especially. Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I assume you differ as a parent than, let's say, Danny Tanner would. Or do you not? You also had daughters, which I guess that's relatable.
Right. Well, my first daughter was born right before I did Full House. I was in New York, and she was born. And my ex-wife and I took her to, she wasn't my ex-wife then. That would have been awkward. But or maybe great. But I took her to LA because I got the job on Full House after I was fired from a CBS show. And so she grew up with Ashley and Mary Kate 1 year older than her. So they would come over for birthday parties, and so she always knew them. And in New York, they would hang out together as they all got older. And I would see them all the time in New York for all these years. I the parenting on that show, I kind of employed it in my own life. So that show, I had a 10-year-old or 9-year-old, and I guess it was a 7-year-old and well, she was a baby. Ashley and Mary Kate were 1, Jody was 5, and Candace was 9. So my own life replicated Full House's scenario. And I did find myself, because that's why Full House was popular, I think, is it resonated because those are the things you go through as a parent. Of course, it's two-dimensional sitcom, but it was meant for a family to sit down together and talk about real stuff. And sometimes it was based on real stuff. The most catastrophic thing that happened on Full House was, well, don't drive a car through the kitchen. That's a good one.
Right.
None of my daughters did that, but a beer at the prom was a big thing, and a cigarette was a big thing. So, there were stronger versions of that as my daughters grew up, because that's life. And we weren't doing a streaming show because there was no Wi-Fi then. but I did learn from it, and I employed my parenting and what kind of a person I was, because people think, oh, he's not like the Full House character. He's this R-rated stand-up comedian. And I don't know why people don't realize there can be all kinds of things to a human being. And if people are over 18 or over 21, that was the kind of comedy that I did back then. A lot of it I probably wouldn't do again. I would not at all say some of the things I said, because I've changed, the world's changed, and I'm like, wow, why did I say that? There's one special I did that I made sure they never released it after it was an HBO special. I just didn't like it. It wasn't because I said bad things, because I didn't really. It was because I just didn't think it was very good. But some people liked it, but that's I feel bad they can't see it, but that's showbiz. And then other things, I wish I could just have a do-over. But in life, with raising kids, you don't, the do-overs are, you talk to them about what you think you've done wrong. At this point in my life now, I talk to all 3 of my daughters and say, boy, I don't know what happened. I was going through a hard time. Mom and I got divorced. I was a mess, and so this is where I should have been there more. I was always there for them. So I was a single dad for a long time until I got married again 4 years ago. And I had girlfriends, but that's confusing for kids too, because you bring someone into their life. I always try to put their feelings first, but then you go through that thing of, well, what about my life? I need to live my life too. But it's hard to separate synagogue and state. I would say church and state. I've never heard synagogue and state. Depends on what state you're in. But I think the key was, it's never too late to admit your faults. And they've also done that with me. And we've been able to, and we've all had therapy. And we, to work on ourselves, and to straighten out things that we're feeling like we wish we could have done different, or things we get neurotic about, or things that we feel were done wrong in our lives. And we all have that. And being a parent is very difficult. It's very hard to be a kid, very hard. For some, it's not. Those are lucky people. I think in today's world, it's not easy for anybody, unless you're in denial or just decide to party. And that's another thing you have to watch. But I've admitted, the whole thing with my daughters is I've been so honest with them and so real with them. So anybody that would ever call me out or say something because of my comedy didn't get or know or have any right to know my private life with my daughters, which is incredibly healthy. I mean, just before we talked, my daughter called me from New York to see how I was doing. And that's a gift. And I was about to go on stage the other night, and my youngest didn't know where I was. And I told her, I had just flown to Pittsburgh, and we'll break a leg. I love you. I miss you. And that's the whole gift, that you get that relationship. and it comes from a real place. Not that every parent should be going on stage,
No,
but
but there's a certain, I agree, honesty is so important. And as a leader in the faith world, like my daughter yesterday, she said to me the other day, literally on a walk, she goes, "How do you know there's a God?" And I said, "Well, I talked to, no, he comes to me in dreams." No, I said, I
That's all.
talked about belief and faith are sometimes as important as anything else we have in this world. And I believe that it builds a structure. I want to talk a little bit about fatherhood,
Mhm.
because I think fatherhood specifically is really, really drastically changed. I just look at the generations of my family. Right, you talked about the Christmas Day spanking. I didn't get a Christmas Day or a Hanukkah Day spanking.
Well, Hanukkah, they spread it out. It's 8 days of beating.
Beating.
You eat your latkes.
But so, and I recalled this a little with my own, and I imagine it happened with my father. I know what happened to my father. I don't think anything was wrong. I know what happened, like the threats that sort of happened to me. I don't believe I was ever like hit. Nothing that's traumatic in my life. And I've never done that. Like it's never even, and even the way we discipline is so different. And I think it's the honesty and compassion, and also the amount of time I think fathers spend in the home has drastically changed. It's not that our responsibilities have changed outside the home. I don't think I work any less than my father, and certainly you're on the road a ton. But
I haven't been for a year and a half. So this is
well, that's true.
this
Yeah.
is because I want to do a new special. So that puts me out. But they're grown up, so it's not like I have little ones. And I was home for most of their childhood. And I was a divorced dad when they were 9, 7, and 4, my daughters. And so I would always get offended when it's funny, I'd be at synagogue and someone said, "Do you see your daughters?" And I'm like, I didn't mean to do the voice, and I'd get offended because I'm their father. I don't know if you have an experience with someone who's a father that did not see their kids. And that's really sad that they didn't have the benefit of seeing their children. And of course, their children didn't have the benefit of seeing their dad, but they were with me. Their mom and I really worked out a wonderful way to do that, as difficult and painful as divorce is. And it affects kids' lives, but so does parents that stay together fighting all day long or lying to each other, which is pretty damn bad. So that happens a lot, where parents are lying or dads they're in denial or not sharing, and that trickles down to the kids' behavior. So and how they think. And it takes a lot of work. My daughters have done a lot of work to just figure out what they want and who they are, and they still are. And so am I. I don't stop working on myself.
Let's talk about something a little fun. But
that wasn't fun.
No, that's fun. It's serious, but it's a serious topic because
Yeah, very.
I think all parents are struggling in a way, especially during COVID. But even to navigate the world, there's no playbook for for what? How many years were the men out working and women not? And today, most families, both parents are working that I know.
When they're able to. Some people are just getting
Yes,
back to
of
work.
course.
Some people literally, everything stopped, and parents either got closer with their kids, or it really they were at each other's wits. But it also, I think in general, this horrible COVID quarantine brought people together. I do think there were more good outcomes than bad, barring health issues.
Yeah. So let's talk about that first episode, that pilot episode, which I've seen with my kids, and I watched it when I was a kid, where you're obviously, as a father in Full House, you're struggling to navigate a world without your as a widow, and you have there's 3 girls. Well, I guess there's 4, but there's 3.
Kimmy Gibbler. She's on my podcast now. You can listen to. Oh, I thought you meant Kimmy Gibbler. Yes, the show had 3 daughters, but yes, there was Ashley and Mary Kate at 9 months old. That's when I met them.
So you have these 2 men who are very important in your lives. Turn out they become very important in your personal life, but as Bob, but not as Danny. But they move in. Do you think that does it really? What can we learn from that? Is it that we take a village, that people have to pitch in? um, what would life sort of be like with an enormous house with three girls and an alcove with no one in it? Was it a necessity, you think, for Danny to have these two men in his life that sort of became like parents? I mean, really, they are. I mean, certainly as we see them navigate, Fuller House, I think Joey becomes even more prominent. But I think, Uncle Jesse in the show, I mean, there are moments in which if he's not there, especially like for Michelle, and, he's like this glue. He's like the cool uncle, but he's also the cool dad in some ways.
Right.
Um,
Well, if you're looking at Full House and Fuller House as real people, the truth of it is the show was stolen from Three Men and a Baby. So that was Tom Selleck and Ted Danson and Steve Guttenberg. It was a giant hit. And Miller Boyette, we lost Tom Miller recently, Tom Miller and Bob Boyette, who brought us Happy Days, Laverne and Shirley, a lot of shows. And Jeff Franklin originated this show and wrote the pilot for Full House. And it didn't know what it was at first, to be honest with you. At first, it was kind of going to be like these guys that have, a dating life, and Danny's a widower, but they're going to have girls on the show. We did a couple episodes in the first season that were like, what show is this? And then it found itself as a family show. The kids were not, even though they were written strong in the pilot, they let us go off and be three guys because Jeff Franklin's a single guy, still is, and was then, and a friend. And that's kind of what they did. And then they realized, wait a minute, something special is here. Candace and Jody are really good actors. There was a chemistry with the whole cast. And then as Ashley and Mary Kate grew up, when they were 2 or 3 years old and started to speak, magic happened, because it doesn't happen. It does not happen that often. I don't know if it's ever happened where a baby becomes someone that stays with the show to 9 years old. And that's what happened. It was from 9 months to 9 years old for Ashley and Mary Kate. And that's enough showbiz for anybody, to be honest with you. And they were very special, both of them, and still are. They're amazing young women. I'm 65, so they're young women, but they're women. And they're dear friends, and I love them a lot. I love Candace and Jody. I just said Andrea Barber, Kimmy Gibbler, she was on my podcast right now, if you go and look for it after you listen to this one. But yeah, the show was, it was the necessity of the gimmick, if you will, turned out to be organic, which is, we always joke about 3 straight men raising 3 girls in San Francisco. Yeah, that can happen. The truth of it is, I think, I knew Dave Coulier personally for 10 years as a stand-up comic. We were friends. He'd already been on the show. I replaced someone. John Stamos, I just met. He'd done 4 TV series and was a heartthrob, a teen idol. But if you go with the characters, yeah, when you are a single parent, if you're a single dad, and God forbid you're a widower, you lose your wife, which is what happened here in that show scenario. And then in Fuller House, DJ, Candace's husband, was a firefighter who lost his life. So they really went to keep that tragic theme, not unlike a Disney movie where there's no dad. Or no mom sometimes, but there's a lot of single parent stuff going on and a lot of that family stuff. So it has some deep roots, and that's what gave the show, I think, a little more honesty, is that it was based on tragedy and how do you overcome tragedy. So I think that was the secret formula, that it had a little bit, was reality, a family show that had silly jokes. And my friend came in as a comedian and lived in the alcove. And my brother-in-law, Jesse Katsopoulos, we all had a different name, by the way. The original name was not the Tanner family, it was the Winchester family, but I never read that because I don't think people know the truth about anything. But yeah, so the idea of getting your friends and brother-in-law and your dear friend to help you raise your kids is a really, it pretty much was a healthy way. If you think about it in a real world, it's not a bad way. It does one thing that's a little difficult, is it distracts from the pain, which eventually will catch up with a kid. But the show did deal with missing mom. And the show did deal with John Stamos talking to Ashley, Mary Kate, or Candace, or Jody, and Dave Coulier doing it too. We all miss your mom. And that was another gift that the writers did. That is why the show resonated for me. And I was happy playing a character, although people see it differently. They think that you can't be a comedian and go out and do shows for 21 and up, and then also play a role in something. And I just go look at the beautiful Robin Williams career. We talked about this when we were
Yeah.
together, and he's Mrs. Doubtfire, which is how much a divorced father wanted to see his children. It's based on something very real. He wants to be Tootsie. He wants to, he dresses up. Tootsie's a movie, kids, but
Yeah. So,
and a play, big play on Broadway. But Robin also did some very notorious characters. So does that cancel out the family characters? Not at all.
no,
And his stand-up wasn't made for kids. I'm sorry?
he may have been the greatest character actor of all time. I mean,
Pretty great.
he
Dead
was
Poets Society and
oh,
Good Will Hunting. I mean, he was pretty amazing. If he'd never done a stand-up career,
yeah,
you would have gone, what an amazing actor. And if he'd never done a movie career, you'd go, what an amazing stand-up. So
yeah.
talking about a multi-talented, unusual soul that we're sad is gone. But yeah, I think that for some kids, it was a fantasy. And I still to this day hear, I'm sorry, my answers are so long. I can't help it because I wanted to talk to you because you're a good listener. I miss you so much right now.
Thank you so much.
But the truth of it is, to be there for kids during tragedy is the times that they'll remember most, and it creates the deepest relationships rather than to drift apart, which happens to a lot of people when they lose someone. They can't look at the kids and all that. So the premise of the show rang true to me. And the love, there's a lot of love. I used to always say, there's a lot of love on this set. And so all the kids would say it all the time. And then it would find its way into the script sometimes. There's a lot of love in this room. That was because I would say that. And I invented hugging on the show. It was kind of in there. And I invented being a clean freak. Little did I know I would turn into the biggest nerd of all time. But I patterned it after Felix Unger from The Odd Couple. But yeah, I guess the real scenario of that in today's world would be with a gay couple of men, if it's going to be male, if it's going to follow the Full House guideline, it would be 3 men, 4 men living together, raising children because their mom passed away. If it's, I guess I'm profiling here, but I guess there must be out there some men that lived together, and John's character was married and Dave's character was kind of trying to date, and my character couldn't get over the loss of his wife. I guess that scenario lives out there somewhere. I've just never experienced it. I've come across people that say, thank you, my mom passed away when I was a kid, and my dad and I watched the show all the time. I've gotten that thousands of times, and that makes it all feel worthwhile that it touched people in that way. But yeah, you don't hear about that scenario in real life very much, but I guess it exists.
Yeah, you touched on something here, and there's an iconic scene that I believe it happens in Fuller House too in some ways. And it may be the first episode, if not, it's in the very early, where they gather around Michelle's crib and they sing I Love You, Teddy Bear.
Yeah, the teddy bear song. We did it both in the pilot of Fuller House and in Full House.
And it's so memorable because it is the word you just said. It is love. It is
that's the whole thing.
Love. Yeah. And you surround her with, it's going to be okay because we love you and we're going to smile with you. And I think
we're going to make you laugh.
Exactly.
We're going to ease your pain.
That's what when my daughter's, my nature is when my daughter's crying is to tickle her. Maybe that's not the right thing to do.
It didn't work with me because if you tickle me, I could poop my pants. So I don't like it.
Yeah, I've tried to stay away from that in our friendship so far. But I think that like laughter and love, listen, we all could use it, but certainly in parenting is what will, at the end of the day, bring upon the opportunity to have those honest, frank conversations with your children
Yeah.
at all ages. And I always say to parents, I'm going to miss, my kids are much younger than yours, and I'm going to miss, I know, like I already missed the diaper days, not changing the diapers, but them being in diapers. Eventually I'll be in diapers and they'll be changing my diapers. But funny how the world works. But the hope is that, but every parent I say that to say, you know what, maybe it gets a little more stressful, but it gets better because you get to do things with your kids. You get to take real vacations where you're not like, holding out to them so they get lost. You actually go on the roller coaster at Disneyland with them, and
Right.
you're more scared than they are, and those types of things. And um, I think there's a lot of lessons from what you've said today, and also from the show, where if you can shower with love and honesty and smiles, that is a big chunk of the parenting puzzle.
That's, I think that's what everyone in the world wants. When tragedy strikes, that's why some comedians get chastised because it's too soon. But the reason I've done some things that could be deemed inappropriate in comedy is because the joke, they didn't get the, and maybe it's not meant for them, but the joke was to go, this is so horrible that this is the only way to deal with it, but through humor. And with my kind of comedy, and a lot of my peers 20 years ago, 30 years ago, that was a very common way to deal with stuff. If you wanted to talk about stuff, you know, you can't joke about the Holocaust. You can't joke, but there are ways that people do, because it's a way of letting the air out of the balloon in a way. Sarah Silverman's pretty brilliant at it. And she said herself what I've said. She said, I wouldn't say now what I said 25 years ago
Yeah,
as a stand-up. And
yeah.
she's an angel, and she only has love in her heart. And, the jokes are there because of the tragedy. Don't, there's certain things I've never heard work as a joke, and I've never done a 9/11 type of joke, those kind of jokes, because it's just that I can't do that. So what you do with your kids at that point is you have to talk to them about it. And then you see that movie Tom Hanks made, Too Loud, Incredibly Close. And then you go, oh, well, that's one way of dealing with it, is making this movie. Or you watch Life is Beautiful.
Yeah.
If you're trying to talk to your child about the Holocaust, that's an interesting movie to watch, because when they're old enough, not when they're the age of the kid in the movie.
Right.
Or look at Jojo Rabbit. It's dealing with a little German kid who thinks Hitler's a good guy, and fantasizes as his imaginary friend. It's so brilliant. But if people took it literal the way they do online, they would find it to be a pro. People can spin anything in their minds that they want to. That could be a pro-Nazi type thing, and it couldn't be more the opposite. Unfortunately, people, don't get levels and understand sarcasm, except unless it's mean, or satire, which is, maybe there's not a time for it anymore, but there are for some people, and they don't have to get it. It's not made for them, but it's not made out of malice. It's made out of love and justice by smart, brilliant people that make movies like Jojo Rabbit and Life is Beautiful. And then you look at Mel Brooks, who made some of the best things ever made, and says, I couldn't do, he did The Producers on Broadway, and that's years after the movie. And it is, if anything's too soon, it's, Dick Shawn singing Springtime for Hitler in Germany about a play that has to fail. What would be the worst subject for a play that has to fail? Hitler. And that's not funny. That's not a funny pitch, but the movie is brilliant. The play is brilliant. Mel Brooks is brilliant. And he said to me, he could never make Blazing Saddles today. He could never do a play out of it, because even though it is an anti-racist statement, if you really dissect it and dive in, I mean, it was written for Richard Pryor, and he was one of the 5 writers on it. but he couldn't do it at that time in his life. So Cleavon Little played the part, but it's not something, things change and the world changes and it grows and it learns. And some things are getting canceled, whatever you want to call it, because it's not suitable at this time, or it hurts people too much. And if something hurts people too much, it does lose the funniness that 20 years ago was just irreverence. 15 years ago was irreverence. But now if it hurts people, I'm the first one in line to go, I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's no, that's part of parenting. I don't know. It's hard to tell the kids. Like Blazing Saddles is in many ways my favorite comedy. Um, and I don't know that I would show it to the kids today. I mean, not my kids.
Well, I would, because of comedy. So my kids are educated. They met a lot of comedians over the years. Those movies didn't hurt them. What hurt my kids were violent movies, where violence is nothing. It's just nothing.
Right.
I mean, people are decapitated and terrible violence. That's true pornography to me, but that's popular, and that will get more popular. And I like a thriller sometimes. If it's real violent, yeah, I'm more numb to it than I used to be. It's everywhere. But years ago, it was like a big deal, but a movie like The Exorcist, I ain't looking at that ever again.
And yet they keep making new spin-offs of Law and Order. Go figure.
They always will.
Yeah.
A good franchise is a good franchise.
Absolutely. Bob, I really thank you for your time and your friendship. This was great.
Same.
And it's serious
I'm sorry
topic.
I didn't let you talk. Why don't you spill your beans? How old are your kids now?
Annie will be 9 in a month, and Trudy is 6, going on 17.
So you're living full house, kind of.
Yeah, right now I'm at my sister-in-law, so it is a full house here, absolutely. So there's two boys the same ages as the girls as they're throwing stuff down the stairs.
Right.
And yeah, so I appreciate it. And I think that for the listeners who listen to this, all 6 of them, they will see a different side of the comedy and the Danny Tanner. So I really appreciate that. And it'll be great.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. And it's really very nice to know you now. So I'll see you in Chicago, because I'll be there doing stand-up. So I'll be sure to invite you, and we can rejoice.
Be great.